Welcome, everybody. I'm here with Frank Costa from Sandalwood. We're going to be talking about MES Light and how to build an MES Light system with ignition. Uh, Frank, would you please introduce yourself and say a few words about Sandalwood?
Sure. My name is Frank Costa, and I'm a manager for the system integration group at Sandalwood. I've been doing digital transformation work for like 25 plus years before it was known as digital transformation, and been doing it with Sandalwood for September 1st. Will be 21 years, which not many people can say anymore. Uh, Sandalwood itself is a engineering services firm with areas in system engineering, system integration, and injury prevention.
Excellent. All right. With that, let me bring up the presentation here. And why don't you talk to us about the case for MES Light?
Sure. As soon as I can, there we are. So, when we talk about NES, right, many people uh, immediately think of, a full enterprise scale system. Uh, but the reality is, for a lot of manufacturing, a full MES just isn't practical. And there's three big reasons for that. The first one, and a major one, is cost. So we know traditional MES platforms can be extremely expensive, both to purchase and to maintain, and they're complex. So implementing a full MES often means extensive customization, integration, and ongoing support. And another issue is change management. So introducing a system, that transforms how operators, supervisors, and managers work can be disruptive to the normal flow of manufacturing, and it requires a high level of organizational commitment. Um, that's why we often look at something like an MES Light approach um, as optimal, and using ignition is a fantastic way to do it. It allows manufacturers, especially the small and mid-sized one, to get the most critical functionalities, something like a track and trace or downtime tracking or OEE, all without the overhead of a full MES rollout. Um, and it's a nice practical path to digital transformation that balances the value, especially to a small and medium manufacturer, and the feasibility of implementation. Um, One of the things I'd like to highlight is MES Light. It's not a diluted version of a full blown MES system. It's more like a strategic deployment model that delivers the core MES functionality on a smaller, more focused way. When we go through it and implement that, the goal is to meet specific operational needs.
All right. I mean, I've seen MES implementations take 12 to 18 months just at the first plant and take years to roll out across a larger organization. It feels like what you're doing with MES Lite, based on that description, is kind of picking the modules of MES because MES ISA 95 standard has lots of different modules and so forth. You're kind of picking what is going to be the most relevant and the most impactful portions of that overall solution and saying, let's get these done first. Maybe it's traceability, maybe it's machine monitoring, whatever it might be. Let's get that done first, and let's get it done in a way that matches the requirements of that company, as opposed to saying, here's an out of the box solution. Hopefully, your process matches up to this.
For sure, and I mean it's you hit the nail on the head. Excuse me, the nose on the head. Um, when you go and do and listen, these systems, they're fantastic. They're just huge and monolithic in nature, right? So your company may only need certain aspects of an MES system. So when you go through and do that, it's a more focused targeted approach to what your individual manufacturing needs are. And again, when you use something, a platform like Ignition, which is inherently, we'll get into it, but it's inherently modular and scalable. It's flexible. It can talk to, basically anything, and the cost is extremely attractive, right? It just helps deliver again that targeted approach. And you've heard me say this, right? But the truth is, you shouldn't bend your process, the way you do work, to a piece of software. The software should bend to your needs. And that's what you get when you have MES Light. It's a targeted approach to the functions you need, and it's flexible and scalable to the needs. As your business grows, it's much easier to go through and deploy if implemented properly.
Yep. So I think you stole your own thunder for the next slide, but could you tell us a little bit about Ignition?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're on this call, we've tagged Ignition on this, or sorry, webinar. We've tagged Ignition, but just in case you guys don't know, and I'm going to read from a script here. Ignition is a software platform used to build applications in industrial automation. It's a key tool for creating HMIs, or human machine interfaces, SCADA system, and MES systems. I mean, that's sort of the tagline, but it's basically a platform where we've gone through and helped build both IT and OT systems. And some of the key features, there's too many to list out, but the ones that I like is it's platform independent. So it doesn't matter if you're running a Windows, Linux, Mac, it'll run on anything. And it's Dockerized, which is huge. It's web deployed, so it's not really beholden to any sort of hardware. It is modular in architecture, so you can purchase or work on only you can purchase the modules only you need for the specific needs that you have. Licensing is unlimited, so there isn't a per tag cost, a per screen cost, a per interface cost. You pay it up front and you get what you get, and you can choose what level of support you want depending on the needs, again, of your plant. And everything's real time, right? It connects, as I said before, to just a load of industrial devices and protocols, fully database, both SQL and NoSQL compliant, and can ingest modern API and REST calls from outside systems. So it's a very holistic package, great platform to go through it and develop not just MES Light components, SCADA, just a whole bunch of things.
And from my perspective, I've seen huge growth in the market over the past 5-10 years with Ignition, where it's not the standard solution out there, but it is turning into the kind of 800-pound gorilla in the space because of all those capabilities that you talked about, and because of that licensing model. Why don't you talk about the combination of MES Light and Ignition a little bit more?
Sure. As I said, MES Light is, it's a practical, streamlined approach to an MES system. And the key principles, again, of MES Light to sort of match with Ignition's, is, the modularity. So MES Light applications are built in pieces, so manufacturers can implement what they need when they need it. Much like Ignition is modular in nature, right? So each module in your MES Light implementation, quality checks, production tracking, operator dashboard, they can stand alone or be integrated with each other, and thus reducing the upfront investment and enabling flexibility. MES Light should be designed to be scalable. So we'll talk about some implementation steps. And it's kind of counterintuitive. The very first core module you grow, you got to give it a little bit of thought to think, hey, I'm not just addressing it for this line or this application. How do I go through and make it scalable? How do I add to this? Not just in the module you're currently developing, adding in maybe new lines or new equipment, but also the additional modules that you're going to be bringing in. Hopefully you have a roadmap when you're doing this MES Light implementation. And importantly, it's value driven, right? So you go through, you do that ROI calculation, right? If I implement a, I don't know, standard work instruction system where I automatically pull in PDFs or other drawings about what's happening on my line right now. Is that going to give me the biggest bang for my buck, or is it going to be implementing more of a SCADA or a OE system? Using those kinds of calculations help you drive what modules you go through develop. And again, all these systems, that's why MES is huge, because they are interconnected. So when you go MES Light, you build what you need, but you always got to keep your eyes to the future. How am I going to utilize this? If I'm building SCADA, how am I going to utilize it for OEE? If I'm building OEE, how am I going to use it for track and trace, so on and so forth. And it's important to note that it's a strategic approach, right? This isn't a shortcut. If you want all 19 modules that an MES system offers, you're going to have to build 19 modules, right? But the difference is it's strategic. It keeps the change on the floor limited, and it allows you to prioritize what is important for your business to implement first.
Okay.
And
go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say on my next slide, I've got just sort of a quick comparison between the two. And again, I'm not saying the traditional MESs are bad. Far from it, right? It's just a different way to implement it. To implement MES. Again, it's more targeting approach. The development model is, driven from the floor, from the needs of manufacturing up. Deployment time, and this when I put this together, I kind of thought it's weeks per function. You get to that speed after you've gone through and you've sort of built your core and your first couple of modules. But after you have that cadence of change, that cadence of getting your operators and those end users used to it, new functionality can be added, in an agile method, which depending on where you're at could be every 2 weeks or whatnot. Cost is much more controlled, and it's spread out over a longer period of time instead of that high upfront cost that traditionally comes with a traditional MES. And the rest of things, it's flexible. The development approach is actually really important because we're working more on software side, right? It does lend itself to an agile approach and more iterative in development, because you're kind of rolling this out. Adoption is usually easier. It is, however, designed for an integrated or phased approach, right? Your phase one might be a SCADA that you roll out, line one, line two, site one, site two. And then once everyone's used to that UI UX environment, you start bringing in OEE, or you're developing the OEE in the background as this is sort of moving up. So again, it's a slow phased introduction of the tools that allow those end users, whether they're operators, engineers, management, the ability to use what they're given, see the value, and you kind of want them to be asking for that next one quicker. And the last one, it's important, when you're using ignition, it's really device agnostic. So you don't have to worry about, an MES that's only tagged to a specific PLC type or family of sensors or anything like that. Where traditional MESs, they're changing. They are changing, but in the past, historically, they've been pretty vendor dependent.
Yeah. And a few of the key points in there that I would emphasize. From a cost perspective, Ignition has a perpetual license model, and it's a very affordable perpetual license model, and so there's not that ongoing subscription cost that you have with a lot of other systems in the space and so forth. Um, And because you're building this as you go, it is that tight fit to what you need on the shop floor. Traditional MES systems, as you said, are very monolithic. They are what they are. Now, they have a tremendous amount of configurability, customizability, but that all comes with a cost. Um, let's see. I guess where you are in an environment that has a highly tailored MES solution already available for it, where maybe you're in, I don't know, food and beverage, and your packaging line is a great fit for what a traditional MES does, and uh, you have one that you like and have experience with, great. You know, if you're going to use that whole thing because you need the track and trace because of the requirements in that industry, and you're going to use, all the different stuff that's in there, fantastic. But I think that most companies aren't in that position where they have an MES that's an exact fit for what they do. And in that case, going with something like an MES Light is a much better approach for them.
For sure.
So let's change up a little bit and talk about what the actual deployment model looks like for this.
Sure. So I've put together sort of a kind of it's 6 or 7 step approach to going through and deploying MES Lite with Ignition. So I'll just quickly kind of call them out here, and then I'll go more in depth with each of those steps. So the first one, and which is very different from traditional MES, is defining that first use case, right? So you want to start off with an operational pain point. It's not a technical wish list, right? The second, you want to go through an architect for independence with an eye to future integrations. So you want these things to function almost as individual units or individual, I want to say programs, websites, however you want to go through and do it. They're individual components. The next is you want to actually go through it and build some of those core modules, right? In development, an agile development way. Then you go through and test those in isolation, right? So staging and validation, using, if possible, real-time data, but not impacting the flow. Some of these systems are read-only from the manufacturing floor from other areas. The danger always comes when you've got like a bidirectional set of communications. You don't want to you don't want to write the wrong value to your PLC as it's trying to run through product. Then you'll want to go through and deploy it, and that deployment is incremental, as I said, line by line, area by area, site by site. The key here is, and we'll get into it later, that incremental deployment speeds up as time moves along, right? The first line is always going to take the longest, first area. Then when you move to the second, you've got lessons learned. And by your third or the fourth, you're deploying much quicker. And that's, you're going to experience that as you move across more modules and more locations. And then you want to go through, and you always want to plan those integration paths from the modules with each other, and then it's maintain and iterate. So the way we've gone through and done it, and I'll get into it, is a little bit more, is you generate the new modules, and then there's a small team that goes in, iterates, bug fixes, and then the incremental improvements happen either with that small team or when you've hit the end of your roadmap, and then you got the bigger team coming back in, and we start upping up the functionality of each core unit, right? Or integration a little bit tighter. So, and with that being said, I can take you through just very quickly these 6-7 steps here with ideas. So again, define that use case.
If I could interject, we do have a couple questions in the chat. We'll get to those when we're done with the kind of preset presentation. We'll go ahead and answer the questions, just letting everybody know. Sorry, go ahead, proceed.
Oh, sorry. So that definition of that use case, it should be, it should be coming, management has an idea what it is, engineering does, operations, but whatever it is, it should be questions like, on here. Why am I losing time? You know, how much scrap am I monitoring? These types of questions are going to drive you to that first use case. What is your biggest issue? Is scrap going to be your problem? Is it tracking downtime? Those questions drive that first module, right? And that's where you go through and say, we're going to go through and do SCADA, and then we're going to do OEE, a quality system. Maybe again, I'll call user instructions or a logbook or something along those lines. The key is have the questions, drive the use case, and make sure that collaboration, where at all possible, right? It works with operation, maintenance, engineering, everyone. The thing that always gets missed, however, in these MES lights, make sure you document what you want the outcome to be and what does success mean, because that helps, especially if this is driven from the more engineering level, it helps drive that ROI conversation that happens at higher management levels.
Yeah, if you're going to want the continued investment from management, they need to see that what they've invested in so far is actually providing benefit.
Absolutely. And the second one was to architect for independence with future, thoughts of future integration. So always the very first one is going to, there's quite a bit of upfront work. And we're talking about naming conventions. This is an instantiation of a UNS. What is that going to look like? When we're looking at SCADA, what kind of tags we're bringing up? What is the structure, tables, scripts? The key at this point is, as you're going through and doing this, you want to avoid hard dependencies, right? As you talk through things, you're not talking explicit mappings or tags. It's very much abstracted. So that means some of the work, as you build the modules, they can be parameterized. So I can drop in a module, fill in a few parameters, and then it goes through and starts collecting the data, showing the data, interacting with the system. And depending on where you're at, it's good to have them again. Try to work independently of the modules you're creating and then integrate later. We've had approaches, and I'll walk through a specific example where we started with a core. We knew we wanted to build off of that. And again, commonizing those names and architecting it properly made the deployment of subsequent modules much easier. And I'm looking at time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. Build that core module, right? You've got your use case. You know what you want to do. If you're doing downtime tracking, spell out what are the needs and the wants, and start building those needs. This is more an agile development philosophy, right? But whatever you do, be quick, test with real data, and as each iteration comes up, get that input from the end users. And the idea, especially for the UIs, keep them simple, focused, common navigation. Use a common header. Use sidebars with Ignition. You can set your left, right, up, down sidebars as you need them. That becomes your common design language. And each module should be interacting with those. The module being presented in the main side of the screen. Testing and isolation. When you have Ignition, I tell all my customers, if you don't know how to use Docker, use Docker. You can spin up test environments. You can hook into data sources extremely quickly, and you can go through that validation. And what you're looking for, accuracy of data capture, triggers. When am I going to use a tag change script as opposed to transaction group? Those are the sort of things that happen and the changes that happen at this level, right? You can go through testing usability of the screens and then the reporting, right? This is critical to ensure confidence, and you want buy-in, right? End users, put this on here. The people using these systems should make their lives easier. It shouldn't be harder. It shouldn't be a bear. It should be a natural, very natural for them to go through and use the systems that you're developing. We've talked about deploying ad nauseum. Again, parameterization that you've developed at the beginning, your first steps, that's what you want to go through and use. Nothing hard coded. The beauty, if you're using a UNS, you can use those top level topic domains and just basically use repeaters in your views and ignition to go through and just enumerate what's underneath them and show them. You add a new tag underneath parameters, it'll show up automatically. That's the power of ignition. That's the power of UNS. That's how you harness those two. And again, that's all done by parameterization and planning. And the last two, again, just to give some time here, everything that you build from the beginning to the end, you have to keep in mind, how does this grow? How does this scale? How am I going to use it? Maintain and iterate. I'm just going to jump, if you don't mind, straight to an example that we had. This was an example of how we implemented MES Light at a customer site. I'm just showing you the backend tables. They wanted to use database to add, remove, and change assets or stations. So we set up very quickly. SCADA used Ignition's tag historian module to collect all pertinent information. We've got some fault for downtime tracking. Fantastic. That was the first module. They found that was going to be their highest bang for their buck. Then they wanted to go in and do some OE tracking. So we went through and added cycle tables. So quick OEE, what's my cycle? What does it look like? Because we knew they wanted to go with track and trace as the next module, we automatically start bringing in that some of the track and trace information, model number, serial number, and whatnot. I'm not going to show the track and trace tables, but that was our next one, which directly utilized both the asset table that was created and the cycle table that we created for the OEE measurements. And again, this, depending on deployment, this is how, this was a very planned and staged process. Everything was independent except for those keys, and we keep using, that's good database architecture, using the same keys and shared keys across just deployment, parameterization, Bob management, where we start using portions of the parameter tool management, and then attribute. SWIs are on here, all kinds of stuff. They all build components off of each other, and each one of these modules get added as a menu item on that left bar where people can come in, and what you're looking at, all that information through session variables gets passed over and informs the next module you look at.
Excellent.
So these are the key takeaways. I wanted to have time. You said there were some questions. Let's go for it.
All right. The first question we got was, is MES Light, is that a add-on module for Ignition or a Sandalwood provided solution on the Ignition platform?
So it is a system integrator provided solution. This isn't, when we go through and do this, there's discussions around what you guys need. This is how we're going to go through and implement, and they're all services. Much like Ignition, here's the software. They're very interested in making sure their software is adopted, making it the best that it can be in the space. We're interested in developing the service, helping you drive your fulfilling the goals of your manufacturing needs. So this is more of it's a concept. This is an idea, right? This is how you go through. You can contact us directly. We've got a lot of experience doing this, but if you've got a preferred SI, have the discussions with them and see if there's services they can offer.
It's also something where maybe you work side by side with the customer to get the first few done while building the internal capabilities at the customer, and then they can take over those sprints afterwards to add on the additional functionality, right?
Absolutely. Just as an aside, right? One of the big advantages of Ignition is the uptake to learn the system is fairly quick, but you don't need, they have certifications and whatnot. But if you got someone who's got a programming background Python super, the Python implementation they use, super easy to use, to learn. It fits in like a software development project. So you have a lot more, a bigger talent pool to draw from. Where when you go to a traditional MES, like I said, they do their work, they do it very well, but it is a very specialized skill set where you can draw from a larger talent pool, right? Including internally. If you've got that, I've seen it a million times, that IT intern that turns into, the junior guy on the team, their uptake of the system. Usually we go through and say we're very involved in the first module, let's say SCADA. Go through, it's documented properly. Here's how you go. Here are the hooks. The second one's more driven from the customer. And then the third one, a lot of it, the third and fourth, they're doing it themselves. Our involvement is more on consulting, making sure they're going down the right path. It's so easy just to hard code stuff. And sometimes you got to help them step back and say, don't take the extra step, parameterize it, link it to somewhere common. So you push all the data collection right to the edge, and everything else is abstracted. That helps you scale.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that Sandalwood has some IP that they've built, like a track and trace module and so forth, that may not be completely off the shelf, so to speak, but it's you've developed a lot of ready to customize, ready to configure for an individual customer. But what we're really talking about in general is more, and I should also say the inductive marketplace has a lot of modules that can be downloaded and kind of plug and play as well. But in general, what we're talking about is having some of those modules pre-built or pre-staged for configuration for that individual customer. Some of it is bespoke development on the Ignition platform, right?
Yeah, correct. A lot of it is usually your customer come to us and they got a PowerPoint. This is what we want the end to look like. We work on it, breaking it down. And like you said, track and trace, the UIs are very generic because the important part is how do all the data work in the background, right? So we have preset tables, views if you're using SQL Server, we have that set so the information can flow to the transaction types. I'm speaking specifically to track and trace. So you have those transaction types. We know the UI is going to change to the customer, so we don't spend a lot of time there because Ignition's super flexible. It's the methods are all there for, definitely SWI, track and trace, SCADA. There's a couple of downtime raising, the OEE. OEE is usually the trickiest because it's going to be 9 times out of 10 it's an integration for with an outside ERP system that holds a schedule. Right. That's really the only tricky part because if you've got SCADA and you can the OEE portions of that, right, are pretty easy to integrate. But again, each customer is different, so we're talking very high level, just like I was showing, tables, functions, and methodologies that go in there.
Okay. We got a question from Conrad. Does this strategy leverage Kanoa MES or is it a different path? I'll admit that I don't know what Kanoa MES is.
Yeah, there's Kanoa. I think there is the Sepisoft, right? And these are all, they're great tools, and I've seen them in action in demos. I haven't seen them used in real life, but this is separate. This is your own development. I know Sepisoft has some great tools that go in there, and we've had conversations with customers saying, should we do, we're thinking of Sepisoft, we're thinking of doing our own thing. And it does boil down to the appetite of the customer to go through, and they're very flexible. They're built on Ignition. The same thing with Kanoa. They have tools that you may be looking for or you may not need, right? And the MES Light concept is you're developing for what you need, but you do have to have, again, an appetite to have those meetings and set it up and define what you want, when you want it, and everything that goes on with an actual implementation. So this is not, I want to make it clear, Kanoa, the Sephisoft, they are products built on Ignition. They're great products. They're MES functionality and whatnot. What we're talking about here is basically sort of doing your own thing for what you need. And that's where I say for us, it's, again, that tagline, the software should bend to your process. You should not bend your process to the software.
Yep. Okay. While I'm on that question from Conrad, I'll plug in that it helps to have an actual roadmap developed for what are the things that you're going to want over the next few years. And that can help shape what you're doing with this and determine whether an MES is the right play or whether it's something where you don't need a full blown MES. And maybe you just need to build up some of those modules like we're discussing. Yeah, go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say too, depending on your needs, right? I talked about UNS is fantastic for real-time data. It really helps structure everything. Maybe you're talking about data exchange from different systems. You got an ERP, you may have an existing SCADA system, right? And you just want to go in and do OEE and I don't know, logbook and SWI instructions. Maybe that's not a discussion in UNS. Maybe that's a CDM, which is a common data model, different concept, but it sort of standardizes the data exchange between systems so that you can add in and everything sort of talking about this on the same speaking the same language between the multiple systems. There's a lot of different ways, and because manufacturers they could have again, I'm using SCADA as an example. You can have a SCADA system you're very super happy with. You don't want to touch it. You just need maybe, like I said, OEE or some other function of MES. That's where the MES Light, you can create the modules you need for what your manufacturing needs are.
Yeah. Next question comes from Eric Nielsen. What add-on modules are you using, i.e. perspective, reporting, etc.?
So traditionally, and it depends on, we got two types of customers when it comes to reporting. They want everything on the screen or they want it in PDF form, right? So we'll go through its perspective. A lot of times SQL Bridge. We'll use the Cirrus Link modules. Again, a lot of people are moving over to the new, Industry 4.0, trying to leverage the MQTT. Cirrus does their Chariot broker's fantastic, and their MQTT built-in modules for Ignition really help the flow of that. But going back to your original question, it's going to be SQL Bridge for sure. Perspective, depending on the size, we suggest Edge, right, to do some of the pre-processing of the data at the edge closer to the PLCs. You get the store and forward, all that good stuff, and then you're sending it up to Ignition to either do. We've seen, load balance visual gateways, one or two of them depending on what we need. We've seen just the back end and the front end. I'm trying to think the common ones. Alerting. The alerting module is always a big is always important. Although we've seen it where we get the system up, making sure it's all accurate, then you can go in and purchase the alerting module to add on and start sending out email, SMS notifications as required. I'm trying to think. I'm going through my head right now. The reporting, you definitely want that if you want PDF reports. And again, it depends on how you want to use it. We like making all the information available on the web page, on demand as required. But some people just do want that PDF, right? As a matter of record. trying to think on the connectivity side. I mean, if you're using Edge, you've got it all. I have not. I'm trying to think if we've run into an issue. Yeah, you'll find the drivers, your equipment's going to drive the drivers that you're going to need. And again, you can connect ignition to an existing high bike, Kepware, RS links, the Somatic, like all the existing, right? We're talking to a customer right now. They've got an old existing data architecture. They don't want to rip out old PLCs. Everything's connected to RS links, and they're worried about what that front end is. And we keep telling them, just if your backhaul is good and you're happy with the data is, we'll just connect there and update your visuals. Let's start front end first, and data acquisition back end, and then get into, planning for adding new equipment in a more modern and staged approach.
All right. Let's see. Next question is from Daniel. He's asking, do you provide module switches or interfaces? I think we've kind of covered that part of the question already. And now he's asking to connect older equipment to the system. And I think you partially addressed that with the Edge, but if you want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. And so don't forget that, one of the powers of ignition, we've been talking a lot about the front end, and it can talk with databases and API and REST calls. On the back end, the actual data acquisition, what ignition was built on 20 some odd years ago, whatever it was, it's about talking to devices. So the drivers, first of all, you can use OPC UA, you need OPC DA. So we're talking everything that used to talk with the old protocols are there. The drivers for Mitsubishi, Allen Bradley, Siemens. When you get into the really, really old stuff, and if we're talking, PLC 2, I've run into that before. PLC 5, right? There are some softwares that are specifically designed to consume data from those older systems and then output something more modern. We've gone through and done it with some of these pieces of equipment. I'll go to Anybus X. They've got little converters that'll take the information, either spit it up as an MQTT message, Modbus TCP, and again, those are all consumable. Depending on what the age of the equipment, I'm talking to someone right now where they've got a very old sensor that they has to be connected to a PLC that isn't very, we'll call it reliable. They keep shutting power on and off. We're looking into, hey, how do I convert this to an IO link sensor, which inherently can send information to PLC, and the masters blow out MQTT messages, which ignition, we talked about seriously, they can consume those types of messages right away. That is more a discussion to have with, we're more than happy to have that discussion with you. Your system integrators, have that discussion with them and how to get it. All you got to do is get it to a protocol that can be read. And that's all I can really say without knowing more about what your issue is.
Final question, Chris Thompson. How suitable is this approach for a manufacturing startup transitioning from manual prototype builds to scaling up mass production?
So this concept, this idea is actually, it kind of fits in line with the startup mentality, right? And I keep going back to scalability, abstraction. If you go through and, hey, a machine is a machine, whether I got one of them, whether I got 1,000 of them, the setup is the same. And when you go through, I'm going to focus in on a SCADA implementation. If you set up a UNS correctly, it doesn't matter how many machines, because I know where all the information is landing. And if you think of it as a folder structure, I don't want to get too far into a UNS conversation. You think of it as a hierarchy, a folder structure. I know my sensors go here. Any inputs from my sensors, my parameters go here. My build data goes here. You set that up, and then you can grow your modules to say, all right, my SCADA is only looking at machine metrics. And then when I look at quality, I'm looking at this directory. The Ignition really makes it easy to go through and traverse that those kinds of models of data and just automatically consume and display that information. And along with that goes, I think I called out tag historian before. You can automatically add, you add it in on the data collection side, it automatically self-subscribes. You start getting that process data immediately. Whether you use it or not is a different question, right? You start collecting that data, and then it's just about building front ends. You can kind of go down a rabbit hole. When you've got a lot of data, this is where you got to focus. What is important? What do I want to do with it? What is my ROI? How do I make it better? And I might have gone off a little bit there. I tend to do that. But going back with the startup, putting in those processes now, that data collection now, we want to, when we start going into full production, we know we're going to need work instructions by station. I'm going to be building, I worked at a plant once, automotive plant, 3 blocks, 29 different engine types, 18-second cycle time. So something like a work instruction was super important to have. At the time, it was all printed out on the sheet. You don't need to do that right now. With Ignition, with the information you collect, change, right? I get a new part in, change my SWI. I get a new part in, maybe it's the same. I don't have to. It can be PDF, it can be JPEGs, it can be videos, all that sort of stuff. You got to think about that, see how you want that to progress. Ignition can make it happen. And again, to the concept of MES Light, that's one of the core tenets of MES is operator instructions. Now you can go out and get a traditional one. Again, they do it very well. You go through and do it however long it takes, or you can build one that matches what you need. And remember, just because you're displaying it, using the data in a certain way, if you need an output to a third party, if the data is there with Ignition, you can transform it, you massage it, make it do backflips. Like there is the only issue I ever see with Ignition, you can do whatever you want, and there's 9 different ways to do whatever you want. It's making sure you're focused in and using those same common practices. It's more of a self-discipline than anything else.
What I would add to that is that as you're transitioning from a startup to mass production, your processes are going to change. And when you think about a traditional MES deployment, they're massively configurable systems and so forth. But once they're in, they're fairly rigid. And I think that one of the benefits that you have with this more bespoke approach of an MES Light is that as you're changing your process, as you're ramping up from startup into mass production mode, it's much easier to change that system as you go and have it evolve with you than it is to go back in and reconfigure your MES system. So that would be one of the other things there. And we got a second question from Chris. Can Ignition handle interactive digital work instructions linked to tools such as torque tools, digital gauges, etc.? I'll just give you an easy answer of yes. Yes, I can do that. I don't know, Frank, you want to talk more about it, but I think that's the basic answer, and we're pretty deep into the time here.
Yes, it is. Yes. The answer is yes.
Okay. Do you want to go back to your key takeaways and just kind of wrap up?
Yeah, just they've been up here, right? When you're doing MES like this is it's not a compromise. It's just a strategy to grow if it fits your manufacturing landscape. It is much more focused on business outcomes, right? So it is, as we said, when you define your first use case, put those metrics in so upper management can see the ROI that's coming in. Again, your first one is much more involved because you don't have to just think about what you're doing today. It's what you're going to do in the future. How is this going to inform the other systems? for traditional MES deployments, that was thought of years and years ago, how they do it, how everything sort of interacts. There's some pretty straight lines, and all you have to do is just think along those lines and map it out. And again, just going back to ignition, it gives you the flexibility to do or not do what you want. When I say it's a digital platform for both IT and OT systems, I'm not joking. I've used it for customers. They're looking for web development, and there's a threshold that they hit and develop. I'm like, listen, if you guys are open to this, to develop web pages, have nothing to do with acquisition, PLCs, OT systems. And about half the time they say, oh, well, we've already got ignition for SCADA. I'm like, great. You guys can leverage it and use it for your IT systems as well. It's a fantastic system. I can't, and I want to make it clear, we get no kickbacks, no, none of that stuff from ignition. I'm just telling you, as someone who's been doing it for 25 plus years, to say I'm a fan is an understatement.
All right. Well, thank you, Frank. Thank you to everybody out there. If you have questions, please reach out to either Frank or myself. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there. But thank you again, Frank, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, and just a quick plug: if anybody that's being Ignition helped us out here a little bit, I'll be speaking at ICC 25 on combining UNS and CDM. So second week or third week of September.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.